In the quiet hills of Pine Valley, a secluded commune called the Light of Ascension lived hidden from the outside world. To the people inside, it was salvation. To those who escaped, it was a ticking time bomb. 10-year-old Eli Dawson had never seen a television, never eaten candy, and never stepped outside the high wooden fences that surrounded the commune. Born into the cult, he was raised to believe that the outside world was evil and that only those who followed Father Gideon would ascend to the next life. But Eli was different. He asked too many questions. Why couldn't he go to school? Why did the cleansings always leave people screaming? And most of all, why was his mother always crying at night? On the night of the Great Ascension, Father Gideon gathered his followers in the main hall. Dressed in white robes, they sang hymns and drank from silver cups. Tonight, Gideon declared, we leave this corrupted world behind. Eli hadn't been given a cup. He was told he was too young to ascend, and was sent back to the sleeping quarters. That's when his mother found him, tears streaming down her face, clutching a small backpack. You have to run, she whispered.
Run to the woods. Don't stop until you hear cars.
She shoved the bag into his arms and kissed his forehead.
I love you, Ellie. Remember that.
Always. Confused but scared, Eli obeyed. He slipped through a loose plank in the fence, one he discovered during secret explorations, and ran into the dark forest, barefoot and trembling. He was less than a mile away when he heard the screams.
10. Sie längse.
Hours later, a passing motorist found him by the roadside, shivering and clutching a note from his mother. His name is Eli Dawson. He is innocent. Please keep him safe. News of the mass suicide shocked the nation. 57 members of the cult were dead. Investigators called it one of the darkest events in the country's history. But Eli lived. Years later, when asked how he survived, he would simply say, "Because my mom broke the rules. Because love was stronger than fear." Eli stayed in the hospital for 3 days. They checked him for injuries, but the real wounds weren't on his skin. He barely spoke, except to ask one question again and again. Did anyone else survive? The answer was always the same, no. Social workers came and went. Reporters tried to sneak in. A man from Child Protective Services brought him a chocolate bar and told him he'd be going to a foster home. The family, Mr. and Mrs. Holbrook, lived in a quiet suburb with flower beds and a dog named Jasper. They were kind, patient, and knew better than to ask questions too soon. But Eli couldn't sleep. He had nightmares of the white-robed followers, of Father Gideon's burning eyes, of his mother's whisper, "Run."
10 came the fire. It started in the woods behind the Holbrooks' home.
Small at first, but too close. Firefighters said it was an accident, but something didn't sit right.
That night, Eli found a symbol carved into the tree behind the house. A circle with a jagged cross through it. The mark of the Light of Ascension.
Someone else had survived. And they were looking for him.
Mrs. Holbrook found Eli standing outside the baref oat, staring at the tree.
"What's wrong, honey?" she asked. Eli looked up at her. His voice was quiet, but steady. "They're not all gone." The Holbrooks moved Eli to a new town within the week. No one spoke openly about the fire, but Eli could see the fear in Mr. Holbrook's eyes as he double-checked the locks every night. Eli started school again under a new name, Eli Morgan, and tried to blend in. But blending in isn't easy when you've never used a pencil, never played a video game, and don't know how to talk about anything except scripture and survival. He was quiet, watchful, always scanning the edges of the classroom. One day, during recess, a girl handed him a folded paper. "You dropped this," she said, even though he hadn't. Inside was a message written in crooked handwriting. "Ascension is not over.
He walks in the world again.
He remembers you, little flame." Eli's stomach dropped.
Little flame.
That's what Father Gideon used to call him. He said Eli's spirit burned too brightly to be ignored. Eli looked up, but the girl was gone. That night, Eli searched through the backpack his mother had given him, the one he hadn't touched since the day he ran. Beneath the food wrappers and the water bottle was a small leather-bound book with a torn ribbon. Inside were pages of her handwriting. Names. Locations. Symbols. Warnings. His mother had known this day might come. She had escaped once, before she was dragged back in. These notes were her unfinished plan to expose the light of ascension for what it truly was. If you're reading this, Eli, it means you lived. But it also means they'll come for you. Gideon had a successor.
A child hidden from the commune.
Trained in secret.
A shadow prophet.
Eli closed the book, heart pounding. He wasn't just running anymore. He was part of a war. And it was time to finish what his mother had started.
The nichts grew heavier.
Darker. Even the wind seemed to whisper warnings only Eli could hear. He began reading his mother's notebook every night, memorizing names, drawing symbols, following the clues she had left behind. It wasn't just a journal, it was a survival guide, a map, and a confession all in one. One entry stood out. They call him the Shadow Prophet. He was never seen in the commune. Raised outside, trained to carry on Gideon's work in secret. I saw him only once, eyes black as coal. A child who smiled without light. Eli underlined that sentence again and again. That same week, a new student joined his class.
A boy named Aservale.
He had a crooked smile, neat clothes, and eyes that felt wrong. Eli noticed him staring too long at the cross pendant around a teacher's neck.
And once, at lunch, Eli sav as her carving so meeting into the wooden bench beneath the table. A jagged cross inside a circle. The mark of ascension.
Eli kept his head down, but his pulse quickened. Asher wasn't just anyone. The Shadow Prophet had found him. One night, Eli snuck out with Jasper trailing quietly behind him. He followed a symbol his mother had drawn in the back of the journal, a hidden meeting spot from her days in the cult. It led him to an old abandoned church on the edge of town.
Ivy crawled up the stone walls.
The windows were shattered. Inside, candles burned in a circle, untouched by wind. And in the center, a letter waited for him. Written in the same crooked script. We are the fire that does not die.
You were born of it, you will return to it.
Little flame, your place is beside me.
Beneat me. A.V. Aservale.
Eli crushed the letter in his fist. He knew now, this wouldn't end with running. It wouldn't end with hiding. He would have to face the cult's new leader. And the next time they met, Eli wouldn't be the frightened boy who ran barefoot through the woods. He'd be ready. Eli knew time was running out.
Verde Aser got closer.
Closer to his teachers. Closer to his classmates.
Closer to Eli.
And no one else could see what he truly was. But Eli had his mother's journal. And now he had a plan. He started small, researching the symbols his mother had scribbled in the margins. One was a protection sigil, drawn from ancient lore Gideon had twisted into cult doctrine. Another was a symbol of banishment. Each mark held power, not magic exactly but belief. And belief, Eli had learned, could be deadly. He drew the protection sigil beneath his bed with chalk and salted the windowsill. Jasper barked every night at shadows that weren't there. Then one evening, as Eli left school late, he found Asher waiting by the bike rack.
Do you believe in fate?
Asher asked calmly, like they were old friends. Eli met his gaze.
I believe in fire.
Asher grinned.
Ten bon visem e.
Eli began reaching out, using names in his mother's journal. One, Marla Quinn, had escaped the cult 15 years ago and now ran a conspiracy podcast. She didn't believe him at first, until he showed her a photo of Asher's carving. She gasped. That mark hasn't shown up since Gideon died. I think he's trying to finish what Gideon started, Eli said. Only this time, the world will see it. Together, they uncovered reports of mysterious fires in small towns across the region, places tied to ex-cult members, places where the light of ascension was rooting itself again. One by one, Eli started leaving warnings at those sites.
Sigils.
Messages.
You are not alone.
A movement began to grow.
Survivors, skeptics, and believers came together under one name. Zebriakas.
The showdown came unexpectedly.
A school assembly.
Hundreds packed into the gym. Asher stood on the stage with the principal, ready to give a speech about youth leadership. Eli stood in the crowd, sweat on his palms, heart pounding. But he wasn't alone anymore.
In the back row, Maler Quinn.
Near the exits, two other breakers, former cult guards turned protectors. Eli stepped forward, his mother's journal in one hand, and faced Asher head-on. Asher paused mid-sentence, then smiled.
I knie jud kam.
Eli raised the journal and shouted, "You don't get to rewrite the ending." And then the fire alarms blared. A protection sigil burned bright on the gym floor. Screams erupted. But through the chaos, Eli walked straight toward Asher. Not afraid. Not anymore. Asher stepped down from the stage, calm as ever, his eyes glowing, not with light, but with that eerie hollow conviction Eli remembered from Father Gideon. "Your mother was brave," Asher said, "but she was afraid of her own power. You don't have to be." Eli stood his ground, hands trembling but steady. Around him, the breakers moved in, clearing the crowd. The protection sigils along the gym walls flickered faintly, reacting to something dark moving through the room. "You're not a prophet," Eli said. "You're just a scared kid playing God with dead men's words."
Ashers Expression darkend. You kult we rulet visem e.
Eli opened his mother's journal to the final page, the one she never finished writing. Instead, he had filled it in himself. "The fire ends with me." He threw the book to the ground. The salt he'd hidden in its spine scattered in a perfect circle around them. A line of breakers lit the final sigils.
The circle pulset. As her lunget.
Eli was ready. He met Asher head-on, tackling him into the center of the salt ring. The air cracked, like thunder underwater, as the protective symbols ignited in a burst of light. For the first time, Asher screamed. His voice shifted, no longer just a boy's scream, but something older. Something that had lived in Gideon, and now tried to live in him. The fire rose, not in destruction, but in purification. Eli stood over him, the journal glowing in his hand. "You wanted a flame," he whispered. "Then burn out with the lies." The final symbol lit beneath them, and in a flash of light and ash, Asher was gone. Weeks passed. The school called it a gas leak. No one ever explained how the symbols appeared or why Asher Vale disappeared without a trace. But the breakers knew. Survivors knew. And Eli? He finally slept through the night. He stayed with the Halbrooks, but now he wasn't hiding. He spoke at events. He worked with Marla Quinn to find and protect other survivors. He became a quiet legend.
Not a prophet. Not a warrior. Just a boy who caused two breaks a cycle.
Years later, when asked what saved him, he would always give the same answer. "My mother lit the match. I just made sure it didn't burn the world." And with that, Eli Dawson closed the final page of the journal and walked on.